Now, let me discuss the current election system in the world based on value-based perspective. Originally, the current election system was established more than a century ago in the West, and now we have similar systems, either direct or indirect, but mostly by ballot counting without deliberative discussion in a system proper all over the world. As a result, the characteristics of the current elections look like those of big meetings. However, when the election system was started, I guess they assumed there would be many small meetings. But in the modern world, almost all the voters do not know the candidates in person, but they just hear and read what they find in media. Most do not discuss political issues and only write one of the candidate names in ballot, which means election for them is voting only. In Japan's national representative election, 50 to 60% of all the eligible voters vote, and in local elections only 40 to 50%. But why so limited? It seems to me that all with voting rights do not feel like really participating in the politics by the current election system. I believe that there is no relation between warmth of shaking hands and his/her capability as a politician. But candidates are competing in how many voters shake hands with a candidate. A candidate, for instance, says, "I used to teach at a primary school, therefore I want to improve education." But all politicians have to keep balanced wisdom covering all fields: medicine, welfare, economy, industries, foreign affairs, and security issues. That means that knowledge in manifesto and flyers is not enough for the voters to make a decision in election. Some say the voting rate should be higher, but at polls there is no system for voters to study any records of candidates, their policy details, job performances, and career records. Since one vote has really a limited influence in the total, most just go to vote without thinking. In Japan, the competition for candidates over the politicians was only 1.2 in 2010. This means 12 candidates ran for 10 political positions on the average, and all candidates became politicians in more than 150 local governments. No election for a mayor was conducted in many regions. Some lawyers argue and prosecute the fact that disparities in voting values are too big, but I think that the opportunity disparity between those becoming candidates and those not being able to become candidates is a much bigger problem in our democracy. When I established a selection system to provide scholarships to non-Japanese candidates coming to universities in Japan, I suggested 1 out of 1,000 candidates, which means 0.1% is selected by a proper screening system. The reason being that the selected scholars will show excellent performances academically at undergraduate and/or graduate schools in Japan, and we do not have to take much care of them. Company presidents prefer to have minimum 3 candidates for one administration officer, but elections have only 1.2 times as candidates. Irrespective of the development stage of any countries, incapable leaders will have inefficient administration, corruption, internal conflicts, or wars because of inappropriate propaganda, inadequate measures, actions against emergencies, and possibly economic default. The consequence is that the people will have to suffer badly. To accept appropriate advice from experts, researchers, or academicians, leaders need to have wisdom and understandings at even a minimum level. In many cases, candidates have reciprocal relations with some big organizations to provide legally accepted support to the candidates, which voters cannot see. The fact brings the politics in the dark. In media, TV program producers seek high audience rate, and newspapers and journals a big number of circulations by making their products as sensational as possible, which may even kill life as politicians. Charlie Hebdo, a French satirical weekly magazine, was too insulting to pagans in my view, boosted its circulations more than 100 times as before, financially very successful. Regarding the Fukushima nuclear power accident, disappointing was the fact that the major causes for the accident were off-site lead power line because of inappropriate specifications and the levels of cooling pumps, all that should have been easily corrected by science math capacities of junior high school if combined with some hands-on risk management experience. I understand that there is some problem in the insurance coverage agreement between the power company and the government, but several hundreds of politicians were engaged in the nuclear power plant project, and many have visited the nuclear power plant in the past 30 to 40 years, but they were just useless in terms of accident prevention. In August 2014, it was found that a local politician produced a lot of false invoices and received reimbursements every month. This news became quite popular every day due to his funny behavior in speech. In the current election system, none of the voters or supporters can show their words of regrets. Therefore, we will see similar absurd cases repeatedly. Media basically love sensational news because they often have person-based perspective, focusing on individuals such as celebrities and say, that poor guy is a problem, enjoying a high viewer rate. They do not care to apply PDCA, namely plan, do, check and act, basics of Kaizen. In elections, there is no system at polls where voters' opinions are collected by the government. That is, no bottom-up information flow from voters to local assembly members, from whom no flow to central parliament members. After the nuclear power plant accident, the local people said plenty of budget was given to restore the local conditions, but why was so difficult to use because of its rigidity? So much unnecessary budgets. That is because there has been no bottom-up information flow in Japan. If we think about the current Japanese voters as having one of the highest cultural standards and education in the world, the current election system is not good enough to motivate them. The system itself is now totally obsolete. During the election period, there is no system for voters to provide opinions to the regional centers or the government, different from excellent global multinational companies where they engage all sections across the board in making their company strategies. When the current election system was developed and established in the West, the number of voters was limited to the first layer of the people or the landlords under the assumption that they have many small meetings to discuss politics, etc., before voting. In the modern world, however, with highly developed technologies and job divisions, most individuals with different backgrounds only develop their worries because they have no opportunities for Q&A or discussion in the regions. The most effective and only way to revive and strengthen any economies in the world, including Japan, is to establish a new system by combining bottom-up and top-down approaches as in successful large companies. By doing so, we can utilize wisdom and know-how from respective regions of each country.